Just a minute.
I gave it to sir.
Okay, done.
Uh,
Sarita ma'am, you
should we
can
start
start.
now? Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Uh, Good morning, sir.
Very good
Good morning.
morning.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, one and all present over here. Myself, Sarita Rathod, Assistant Professor, IT Department. On behalf of KGCIT IT Department, I welcome you all for the session 1 of day 6 of AICD sponsored virtual STDP on leveraging artificial intelligence and data analytics for healthcare. The session is on robust brain tumor segmentation and overall survival prediction. Now, I would like to introduce the speaker of today's session, Dr. Mehul Rawal, Dean of Ahmedabad University, Ahmedabad. Sir, areas of experts are image processing, artificial intelligence, computer vision, active learning, and biometrics. The Google Scholar citation is 675, I10 index is 12, H5 index is 11. He has been awarded as Outstanding Associate Editor by IEEE Access, Fabulous EduTech Leader Award by World Education Congress, Mumbai, Intel AI First Prize for Multimodal Brain Tumor Segmentation Challenge 2019, etc. Sir has received the fellowship under Sakura Exchange Program in Science for Collaborative Research Activity Course B at Okayama University, Japan. Argosy Visiting Associate Professor, Fall 2016, Olean College of Engineering, USA. Sir has received the Canadian Commonwealth Scholarship by Government of Canada, APJ Abdul Kalam Kerala Technological University Researcher for the year 2016 award by Government of India. Thank you very much, sir, for joining with us again and accepted our invitation again. Last time also the sir was there in the slot 1 for delivering a session with us. That was very nice and great session, sir. Thank you very much. Now we can move ahead with our session today. Over to you, Mehul, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, and it's really a pleasure and privilege. Thanks to Dr. Kotecha for extending the invitation, and thank you all for joining the session. The work which I am showcasing is a ongoing work with my PhD student, Ms. Rupal Agrawat, who is a faculty at Nirma University, and we are looking at it as a holistic work to look at an end-to-end method development, which will have the first flow of brain tumor segmentation as task 1, and the second flow we will be looking at the survival prediction of the patient. Right, so that's our overall theme, and maybe I have slightly rechanged the title in a sense. I'll showcase some of the challenges that you will find whenever you are working in medical image processing domain, and also some of the research opportunities which are available now. And we are doing it through doing a case study of a brain tumor segmentation, which is the interesting domain which we are looking at. I'll restrict myself maybe to around 1 hour, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, and then we would have a round of discussion if you want. And in between, I request any one of you to interrupt if you want, and we can discuss that particular point at their instance itself. And this is the agenda which I am setting up myself for, and maybe to you as well, that we will look at broadly what these whole game of brain tumor segmentation is all about. And then we would look at the first part, which are the challenges, right, in medical image analysis. And then we will be looking at broadly two of the important sections. One is the brain tumor segmentation, and you understand that segmentation is the word, if you look at segment, would essentially mean breaking an image into its constituent parts, right? So here we would be assuming a image cube which is given, and we are going to look specifically at magnetic resonance imaging as a modality, and we will be also looking at a specific type of tumor which is known as glioma. So, and once this particular type of data set is available, we would look at various ways of trying to solve this puzzle of finding where the tumor is. So we are detecting it and then separating it out from the rest of the content. So therefore, we will be looking at a segmentation, and going with the flow. Most of the modern methods are dependent on deep learning architectures, but I'll also showcase to you some of the non-deep learning approaches as well. So we will, while we are building the story, I'll also put you through the ideas of non-deep learning approaches for solving this problem. But since deep learning approaches are beating the conventional approaches by quite a margin, they have sort of in last 5 years have become a sort of a de facto standard. And therefore, I'll introduce some of these CNN architectures which are popular, and then I'll show you some of the encoder decoder architecture which we have been using for our work, and then of course there will be some results which will be put in front of you so that you can appreciate the whole game. And then once we have the tumor segmented, then the other important task that we would like to do is to look at an overall survival prediction, right? Now, let me put a disclaimer here that this is an extremely difficult task to do. And one of the reason is that when we are looking at glioma type of tumor, they are actually very, very aggressive. In a sense, their characteristics are completely unpredictable. And if you have unpredictability, then it becomes extremely difficult to even do the statistical analysis, right? So these results which we are deriving has to be taken with a pinch of salt. And current state of art as stands now is around 62% of accuracy on some curated data set. So you can remember you can appreciate the type of difficulty that we have. So therefore, we will look at these tasks too as the second component of our discussion, and then I'll share some of these insights into the way forward, maybe, and through the discussion that we do. So to commence with the part, let's look at the first idea of about the tumor itself, right? And we know from a very, very elementary biology that we do and that we study is that when you look at a tumor, right, it's a normal death and the creation of the normal cells when they go haywire, right? And therefore, there is a extremely fast growth or the multiplicity of the normal cell that gives rise to a tumor. And it's basically an accumulation of a lot of these abnormal, we call it as an abnormal because they have gone out of their normal cycle of the birth and the death, we call it that way. And therefore, if we look at tumor, we know that there are two of these types, the malignant ones which are more aggressive, which also have possibly a shorter lifespan for a person unfortunately suffering from it, and then there are these benign ones which they are sort of a tumor, but then they are not having these malignancies, and they can remain in your body undetected and not causing anything, maybe for years altogether as well. And the other classification which is popularly available in literature is to fragment these tumor based on the location of their origin, right? So if the tumor develops within the brain itself, so because in this case we are going to look at a brain tumor segmentation, so since the tumor is looking in the is developing in brain itself, we will call it as a primary tumor. And let's say if it is developing in any other body part, and through a blood flow, if it travels that particular abnormality of a cell, if it travels through the blood flow and reaches the brain and causes a tumor there, we call it as a secondary infection, a secondary form of tumor. And the World Health Organization, or in general, the medical fraternity, has given various severity grades to these types of tumor. And we are going to look at specifically the tumor of a glial cell in the brain. So therefore, we are calling it as glioma tumors, right? And we are focusing on that. And one of the reasons to focus on that is because the availability of the data set, right? So we will talk about that as a topic also separately, that when you are looking at a data driven approaches, one of the important things that we have to also look at is the availability of the data. And therefore these tumor type depends on the growth rate, right, of a birth and the death cycle of these cells. So they are dependent on how quickly the multiplication process is happening, right? And it gives rise to these accumulated masses, which we call it as tumor. The other thing is biologically, that how much of the blood supply is available for the tumorous cell, and higher the supply is, more is the faster is the growth that we are looking at. Usually it starts formulating by having a dead cell at the center, and that we call it as necrosis. So this is one of the terms that we will again encounter when we move on, but you will find that the tumor will have a dead cell at the center, and then the accumulation starts happening around that. Severity also depends on actually the size and the location at which the within the brain the tumor is occurring, right? So and to what area, and how much is the size. That is what I was telling it to you earlier. And one of the other thing that is you will find in segmentation is that the tumorous cell which are giving rise to, there is something known as edema, which is an inflammation of a tumorous cell that looks very similar to the other healthy cells in the brain, right? And therefore, if one is interested in doing segmentation, then they find really challenging to segregate between the healthy cell and the tumorous cell, right? So you can see that there is a lot of complexity in terms of segmentation that comes in here, like location, the size, the similarity with the normal cell, and so on. So therefore, this is really a tough problem to look at. But thanks to medical imaging, it is believed, actually it is actually believed that the human brain is the least studied organ by the medical fraternity. And now with the type of powerful imaging technology which is available, and of course the signal processing also combined with it is giving rise to a lot of these new insights. And therefore these are the very two important integral medical imaging techniques that people are using. And one of them is the magnetic resonance imaging, which is MRI. And you will find that MRI usually is about sensing the soft tissues, and the MRI modality is based on the electromagnetic power, right? So what happens is that a high intensity electromagnetic component energizes the hydrogen atom in our body. You know that our body has a water component in it, and there is a hydrogen atom which gets excited by this particular magnetic resonance, this particular magnetic energy. And that magnetization leads to the excitation of a hydrogen atom which goes to a higher energy state, and when it is falling back from the higher energy state to a lower energy state, we know by the physics that it releases the energy, and it is this particular energy which is being captured as an image, right? So that's basically the principle that is available from magnetic resonance imaging. And the second one, which is CT, which is a computed tomography. So computed tomography is nothing but it is making use of X-rays, and computed tomography usually is used to image the hard bony structure rather than the soft tissue structure, right? And if you look at these resulting images that you get, right? So this first image A, which we are looking at, is actually scanning a brain, right? And you can see that this is an output which a computed tomography image is generating. And if you look at these images from B to D, you can see that these are typical MRI images which are being generated. And one of the good things that with an MRI which is possible is that you can control the amount of magnetization and polarization, and the brain tissues, because normally you will find that in our brain there are these three types of let's call it as elements which are present, and they are the white matter, the gray matter, and the cerebrospinal fluid, CSF. So each of these white matter, gray matter, and the cerebrospinal fluid can have different responses to different types of MRI energy, and therefore that gives rise to different types of images. So if you look at these image B, depending on the energy and the polarization that we are setting, we are giving rise to, it gives rise to basically these 3 or 4, or there are 5 or 6 different MRI modalities which one can look at, right? So this is one of them, which is a T1 MRI modality, this is T2 MRI modality, and this is the third one, which is DWI MRI. So if you look at from that particular perspective also, then MRI appears to be a better modality because it has been able to capture a lot of internal details here which are missing in the computed tomography. And therefore, we will discuss the brain tumor segmentation by considering an MRI as a modality. Also, if you look at the way the tumor is being captured, right? So if you look at this image in A again, then you will find that here is the presence of a tumorous structure, but then unfortunately CT is not being able to capture it very well here, right? So this is a portion where I'm hovering around is where there is a presence of a tumor. On the other hand, if you look at it from an MRI perspective, then you can see that this particular bright structure which is being shown here is actually a tumor. And therefore, if you look at from a image classification perspective, then you will find that there are 4 types of classes that you can find, right? So 3 of these were the healthy brain tissues, CSF, white matter and the gray matter. And then the tumor becomes a 4th class. And what we have to also look at is we are not just satisfied by segmenting the tumor, but we would also like to do segmentation within tumor itself, right? So we would like to, so if you think of it as a 2-stage classifier, then first stage classifier is giving you where is the tumor, and then the second stage would be sort of doing a classification within the tumor structure itself, right? So we'll be looking at the second level of classification as well. Now, as they say, there is no free lunch, right? So there are these challenges which are also coming in medical imaging, and it's not a easy cakewalk for a practitioner, right? So one of the reason that it is difficult to work this particular domain is you will find that there is this signal to noise ratio, right? Which is like if you have studied a bit of electrical engineering, then you will realize that signal to noise ratio is like a fidelity factor. And if higher the signal to noise ratio, better it is to do the type of signal processing or noise removal kind of a thing that we want to do. But usually you will find that in medical imaging, these SNRs are lower. And not only that, there can be various artifacts which can come into the raw MRI data itself. And there can be several reasons for this particular artifacts to come in, which can go from the type of MRI machine that you have, the amount of power, that is whether it is 1 Tesla, 2 Tesla, the amount of power which is used to capture these images, whether the patient is holding himself or herself steady while this imaging is being done. And there are so many different factors wherein this particular artifacts in a raw MRI images can come. One of the other thing that we will discuss is you will find that there can be very low intensity variations that can be present. So you can think of this is due to the magnetization effect, and it is like either there is a very low frequency which is getting superimposed on the normal intensity. So those who have done a bit of image processing, they know that these images are in the form of matrices, right? So these low intensity variations is like adding a constant to a matrix. And therefore what it will do is that it will change the whole grayscale level from level 1 to level 2. And therefore if you are doing segmentation based on grayscales, then that's really a problem that can come. The another thing which an imaging technique does is it also looks at and gives you these additional information, which actually we are not interested in right now, right? So it can give you a skull part, or it can give you the fatty component around, right? So if you carefully observe both the CT and MRI, since we are looking at MRI, let's look at it. So if you look at these external surface over which I'm moving around, that's the skull part, right? So MRI imaging is also giving you the information about the skull. Now this is really not warranted from our perspective. What we are looking at is this internal brain image, because that's what we would like to process. And therefore, and you know that the brain is enclosed in this bony skull structure, so we have to remove this particular component as well. So for us, they are also treated as, though it is an additional information, but they are also treated as a noise in this case. Depending on the MRI machine power, that is what I was telling you, that the intensity profile, right? So if you capture an MRI image using 1 Tesla machine, and if you capture an MRI imaging using 3 Tesla machine, then you will find that there is a definite variation in the intensity profile. And the most interesting challenge from an engineering perspective, which we are looking at, is that these are all data driven approaches, right, which we are talking about. Whenever we are trying to solve these problems, we are always looking at a data, and as they say that the data is a new oil, right? So data is the new currency. And if you really look at in a public domain, there is not a good amount of very high quality data. Let me put it that way. There is not a very good quality or a very high quality data which is available, right? And that makes it slightly difficult problem to deal with. It's not that there are no solutions, but this is also turning out to be one of the problems. And another interesting problem, which is from a data science perspective, is that there is a lot of imbalance in this data. So I'll show you one of a popular data set which we are using, but you will find that most of the images in that particular data set is from the brain tumor, and therefore we don't have any non-brain tumor images available, right? But fortunately, what happens is when you are processing an MRI, that's a point which I think I should highlight, is that when you are processing an MRI, it's not only in space that you are getting the data, because you know that image is a two-dimensional signal, and it spans in space, right? So it has got these X as the rows and Y as the columns, right? But when you are taking an MRI scan, it is not only X and Y, but you also get the third dimension, which is the depth, right? Because when you are scanning, there are 3 protocols to scan. Either you can scan from left to right, right? Or you can scan from top to bottom, or one can scan from front to back, right? So that gives rise to either an axial or a sagittal or a coronal view of the MRI data. And therefore, what is made available to you is a hypercube, right? It's not just one single image. So if you take a slice, you get a 2D picture. But now if you look at the depth, you are going to get the hypercube, right? Let's call it as hypercube. And that's the cube which we are going to process. And therefore, we are not going to work with pixels, but we are going to work with voxels, right? So pixels are picture element. The voxels are the volume element with which we are going to work. And that's where the class imbalance problem is slightly detuned. I mean, slightly, not detuned is not a correct word. It's slightly reduced, because in this hypercube, there are many images where you will not find the occurrence of the tumor. And then when it hits a particular plane, the tumor will start appearing, right? So from that perspective, it is not as bad as it appears, this data imbalance problem. And it is very intuitive that data imbalance problem is really challenging, because if you make your machine learn by looking at only one type of data, then there will be a bias, right, in the decision that the machine is going to roll out. And therefore, a class imbalance problem can really give a bias to the results. So we would like to avoid it, right? So we'll discuss as well what are the different means in which we can avoid the data imbalance problem. And now let me introduce a very popular data set, and that particular popular data set is known as brain tumor segmentation challenge, right? So from 2012, there is a worldwide challenge which happens every year. This year it was, I mean, in 2020 now, it was in 2020, it was during October that this particular challenge was held. And this particular challenge is all about doing these brain tumor segmentation, right? So one of the, and this challenge is being organized by the Perelman Medical School of University of Pennsylvania. And one of the good idea to participate in such challenges is that you will get an access to a data, basically. So let me be honest with you, and that was our motivation, because we were looking at the data and we were not getting a good curated, well annotated and quantified data, and that's where we landed up with this particular challenge, and then we started participating in it from 2018, and that we found 2019, sorry, and that's where we found it to be very useful. So if you look at a challenge, right, and there are, so this is the slice which is telling you about the multimodal tumor structure as well. So this is a slice which is giving you the idea about different subcomponents or different segments within the tumor, right? So if you look at one of the modality which is known as a FLAIR, so again, this is another type of modality for MRI. Then you can see that there is this whole tumor structure which is being visible here, right? So there is some pseudo coloring which is done in yellow, which I am hovering about. But if you look at an MRI modality, which is shown in the bottom, then you can see that this is a FLAIR modality which is showing you the tumor, right? Then the tumor, as I have narrated these words to you earlier, the necrosis, right? So which is a core component to it. So if you look at a tumor, then there is this second modality, which is known as T2, right? So if you look at T2, it is revealing to you this tumor core. So which is this pseudo coloring which has been done on the top, and this red is like a tumor core, right? So that's from a whole tumor, there is this tumor core which we are looking at. And then if you go to the third modality, right, which is T1C, then if you look within this particular tumor core, you will find that there is this necrotic components which are shown here, right? So these necrotic components are shown to you in this green component as a pseudo coloring, right? And if we fuse all these three, so you can see that there are these multiple labels. Now there are 4 labels which we are looking at. We have these necrotic component coming in, right? Then we have these enhancing tumor which is coming in, and then we have the whole tumor. So these are 3 labels, and then everything else in this case turns out to be the normal healthy tissues. So again, this becomes a multi-class classification problem, and you are looking at 4 different labels here. And the 3 sub-tumor labels, if you fuse, you are going to get these type of structure, right? And therefore, I told you that we are looking at 2 tasks. Task 1 is to get these types of multiple labels. So the problem will be, given the hypercube, as we have seen in the MRI, we should be able to segregate first the tumor, and then we should also be able to find out the necrotic component, the enhancing component, and then the whole tumor structure itself, wherever it might be located in the brain, of course. And the other thing that you should also can observe from this particular slice is that each of these modalities is revealing some different types of information, right? So if you look at FLAIR, or if you look at T2, then you can see that the flare is not so greatly revealing the tumor core, which this particular T2 has been able to do. And T1C is the best in terms of revealing the dead cell or the necrotic tissue. So one of the modern way of solving this particular challenge is that all these modalities, whichever are the modalities which are available, I think there are four modalities, sorry. There are four modalities which are available with this multimodal brain tumor segmentation challenge, right? And here they are T1, T2, FLAIR, and then there is this T1 gadolinium. That's the modality which is available, right? And so this is a bit of discussion about what that particular challenge is and how the data set has been curated, right? So the data set has got multiple hypercubes which are available, and they are taken from different hospitals. They are taken from different MRI machines and different scanners, right? So now you can think that if you are looking at a heterogeneous data set, what type of difficulties you can come in or you can face, right? And one of the foremost difficulty in medical imaging is about the privacy of a patient, right? So electronic health record has to be treated as an extremely private information, and there has to be a security protocol in place whenever you are revealing these types of information. So, but we are not talking about that right now, but this data set ensures that everything is anonymized, right? Even the gender is not being told, and then the data is being sent out to the public domain. And the other thing that these challenge does for you is that it does a bit of pre-processing. So we will see, I'll show you some of these pre-processing of the images that we have to do, but some of the very elementary pre-processing is being done by this challenge itself. And like what type of pre-processing is being done. So you know that I have told you that these are available as a hypercubes, right? And let's say we are looking at an axial view wherein we are taking a scan from top to bottom. I mean, I'm going in this direction. That's why we call it as an axial view. And therefore, once the images has been captured, a patient moves a very minor movement. So if somebody does a minor movement, then the coordinate system or the coordinate space, right, between these two are slightly misaligned. Between the slice 1 and the slice 2 is slightly misaligned. And this type of misalignment will not work. So therefore, what one has to do is that you have to realign these coordinate systems of all the slices actually, and that is known as registration. So registration itself is in a big problem here, right? So this data set fortunately gives you everything co-registered. Then other thing that you have to do is that these protocols, these MRI scans are taken from different resolutions, right? So if they are at different resolution, you have to bring them at same resolution. And one of the way you can do it is by doing it through interpolation. But you have to ensure that this particular interpolation does not change the anatomical structure, right? So therefore you have to look at, like, you do interpolation not only in space, but one has to do also interpolation in the z-axis, which is the depth axis. And therefore you can see that these isotropic resolution meaning it is doing in all the three directions, x, y, and z. Some type of minor interpolation has to be also done. And it removes this skull, right? So I have shown you earlier that there is a skull component which is in the image, which is enclosing the brain. And if you look at these images, we are just looking at the brain structure. We have removed the skull component which was appearing earlier here. And therefore we call that as a skull stripping, right? So that's removal of the skull and that's why this particular data set is extremely nice and validated. And another important thing about this particular data set is that they follow a multi-protocol for labeling, and they give you the annotated ground truths for the tumor as well, which would have been done by multiple clinicians. And you know that in case whenever you are annotating a data, there is always these variability which could be coming in due to the observer, because we are finally a humans. And to avoid intra observer variability, all of these data set actually is being annotated by more than one clinician, and that's why it is very interesting to look at. And the other important part while you participate in this particular challenge is that the methods which you develop, right, those methods you will be able to study because they maintain the leadership boards, and that leadership board gives you information about the accuracy of the method that you are developing and the other basic matrices which other matrix actually which is telling you how good or bad your method is, and you can do it n number of times, and therefore you can always keep on improvising your method, and then you can finally give it for the test set by some cutoff date. And they maintain a leadership board, and everyone in the world, if they are looking at a similar data set, then it becomes very easy for your algorithm to be compared with some other algorithm, right? So that is also one of the benchmark that a typical reviewer will be looking at whenever you are looking at publication based on these types of ideas. So that were slightly off remarks that I was making, right? So I'll pause here if there are any questions that anybody has at this particular point of time. Then you are welcome to ask. Is there any questions that we have?
Participant.
Fine.
I think we can proceed, sir.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing. So now we will be going into actual implementation part, and we'll show you some of these architectures. They are popular for the segmentation first, right? So we'll spend about 15-20 minutes doing this. And if we look at so as I was narrating it to you earlier, right? Any image processing task needs a pre-processing and the post-processing, right? Pre-processing is to be done because we would like to improvise on the segmentation task. And now what we are entering into is the realm of image analysis, right? So type of pre-processing which is to be done is, first thing is that you should look at
नवल को भी इंटरेस्ट मेरा कुछ नहीं बात कर रहे हैं, फिर मेरे को मालूम नहीं था क्या कर रहे हैं एग्जैक्टली। अभी राजाना को उतना टेक्निकल नहीं मालूम।
पार्टिसिपेंट प्लीज
एक ही बोला जावा AWS समझा पूरा। AWS Amazon वेब सर्विसेज तुमको ऑलरेडी बोला, क्लाउड।
सॉरी सर।
Okay, so we are looking at the idea of improvising the input hypercube that we are doing. And one of the first thing that we have to do is to remove these slow varying frequency that came into picture, right? So that's what I was telling you earlier, that there are these, and we are using a word bias here because bias is signifying either a addition of a constant like thing or maybe a very slow varying frequency to the matrix. And you know that image is a matrix, and therefore we need to do these corrections, and that can be done by using some type of a filters, right? So we know we can carry out these types of a low pass filtering impact, and these are based on the local information processing, right? So images are exhibiting some type of correlation, and therefore we are processing it over a very small region, maybe 3 by 3, 5 by 5, 7 by 7, and so on. And we do the filtering operation and we remove this particular bias field correction. The other important task which one has to do, maybe from statistical perspective, because these algorithms are iterative in nature, and therefore if you would like to have a faster convergence and you would like to also remove the impact of the bias and the variance, then one can do the normalization, right? So and it has also been shown in the literature that if you initialize the weights from some standard normal distribution, I'm not saying, I mean, not the normal distribution, but from any standard distribution, then in that case, the convergence can also be faster. So this normalization can be taken in both the perspectives. Then, of course, as I was narrating, you have to do the skull stripping and the registration. So registration is like aligning the whole coordinate system between the two slices that we have. Once the pre-processing has been done, the next task which is to be done is to look at the segmentation component, and it happens many times that segmentation results are noisy. Now, one thing that I have not told you so far is, remember, these tumors may not appear only as a homogeneous object at one point in the brain. The tumors can be accumulated in a small size at different locations in the brain as well. And if the segmentation is noisy, then segmentation can generate a lot of false positives. So false positive meaning the voxels which are not actually tumorous can also be shown as tumorous, or the other way around. There can be also a lot of false negatives, right? So one has to do a post-processing wherein one can do something like these connected component analysis. So connected component analysis means that I look at the neighborhood, which is 4 neighbor or 8 neighbor, and then I connect, or I find the neighbors, right? And then I connect those neighbors. So if I complete this connected component analysis, this is like you are trying to find a contour of a tumorous component, right? Or of any object for that matter. So one can do this connected component analysis. Now, while you are doing this, it may happen that many times there can be a noise even after you do a connected component analysis. So you would like to remove that particular noise. So to give you an analogy, this is like you are trying to connect the dots using pencil, and many times if the pencil lead is thickish, then you will see that there is a very thick line going from one to the other. That means, and you would like to thin out that particular line, right? So you can do these types of morphological operations, which can morphological operations of like dilation, or morphological operations like a thinning, which can thin out the connected lines, you can say, or the contours or the edges in this particular case. Now, what these connected components are doing is they are based on the local information, right? And here is one more processing, which is based on more statistics and idea, and that is about using a conditional random fields. So if you look at a classical classification problem, then usually the classification decision is based on a single point, right, or a single data point. But if you are looking at a conditional random field, then it considers the neighborhood of a particular voxel, and then it assigns the label to it. So it is like doing more like a consensus based or an ensemble, that's not a correct word actually, but more like a consensus based local properties which are studied, and then the conditional random field is assigning a label to it, right? So the post processing is going to further improvise on the results we have. Now let me very quickly walk you through a classical handcrafted feature based segmentation. So it is not that brain tumor segmentation can done only by deep learning techniques, but they can also be done by using handcrafted features. And pre 2012 era, you will see that most of the segmentation was done by handcrafted features, right? So let's say, let me ask you this very simple intuitive question. Given an image, right, I'd like to bifurcate it into two different gray values. Let's say the resulting image will have the gray value only value as 0 and the other value as 255. Any ideas on how we might be able to do this type of segregation? Anyone? If you can respond. The question is, we would like to separate out the grayscale image. I'd like to convert it to a binary image, which is with a value only 0 and 255. How do you think we can do it? Anyone? If you can just respond, because
A participant? Anyone?
Is it by normalizing every pixel?
yes. So no. So if you normalize, what you are going to do is you are going to normalize the whole range. But my question was that in the resulting image, we are going to have only two grayscale values. Either it is 0 or it is 255. So anyway, thank you for responding. And the idea that I was looking at was these thresholding based methods, right?
Can we test? Yes. Okay.
Exactly. So that's exactly the point that you are driving on. And we can have these threshold based methods which can use different thresholds to segment the image, right? But the problem is, for each different region, we may have to find the specific thresholds, right? And you know that finding threshold is always very tricky. The other methods which are all using these different types of ideas are either they can be based on edges, because these are boundaries and we can use high pass filtering to segregate based on boundaries, or they can be based on regions. So you know that images are exhibiting correlation, and if you are looking at a region of a specific type, then they will share some type of common characteristics, right? So one can then use these homogeneity within a particular region to identify what is the size of that particular region. And then there are various different methods which are all either using texture or they are creating some type of active shape based modeling, this is considering the shape, the size, the anatomy of the organ, and can extract features for you, right? And then these handcrafted features are used to do the segmentation. But then these handcrafted features have a limitation because they may not be able to fully reveal the structure of the they may not be able to fully represent the tumor that we are looking at, and therefore there is this emergence of deep neural networks which have taken place, right? So I need not to elaborate on deep neural network, but one of the things that has happened with deep neural network is that it has made these problem even more, I'll say, blacker than the black, because it is solving into an end-to-end manner, meaning you just provide the input and you just collect the output. The analysis which is happening in between is very difficult to obtain, right? But then these networks are finding features on their own, and they can find features in a hierarchical manner. So therefore, they can find features at different scales. They can find features with different relationships, and therefore they are currently giving the state of the art accuracies. And therefore, we will have to sort of start, and we do have to use them in order to generate these interesting results, right? And what it has done is, of course, there is this hardware and the software implementation in terms of various libraries that have evolved. One can also use different optimization techniques which was off the shelf. Now they are encoded as a part of these particular libraries. So one can use them to do more robust learning. And then, of course, as I was showing it to you, we have access to the robust data sets like BRATS, now Brain Tumor Segmentation Challenge, which can help us. Our typical deep learning architecture, if you look at, are all based on these convolution layers, right? So one of the advantage with the convolution layer or with the convolution, you know what is a convolution operation. So one of the advantage with the convolution layer is that it allows you to share the weights. So they are all location invariant. And therefore, we have seen the classical neural network, which are all basically a fully connected neural networks, right? So if we look at a feed forward type of structure, we know that from every neuron in the previous layer, there is a connection going to the neuron in the next layer. And therefore, the people have analyzed deep learning neural networks, and most of the parameters which are to be learned are there in these final fully connected layers, because they do not do a weight sharing. And since they don't share a weight, there is a lot of replication that happens here. So convolution neural networks allows you to process images in the space, and the filters can do a lot of weight sharing. So therefore, the overall number of parameters which you have to learn are reducing. And then there are these operations like pooling, wherein you would like to reduce the spatial dimension of the activation map that is being generated here. And you can see that there is this cycle of convolution, pooling layer, convolution, pooling layer, and then finally there is this fully connected layer that comes into picture, right? And one of the other things that one should also note is we are looking into a supervised form of learning, right? And in case of a supervised form of learning, we are interested in learning a function which maps input to output. Now, this mapping may not be always linear, but this mapping can also be a non-linear. And therefore, at an end of a convolution layer, we introduce usually the non-linearity by putting some type of activation functions, as we call it as, right? And that activation functions introduces the non-linearity, which is essentially governing the type of relation between the input and the output. The most important component is you have to first quantify what is the amount of loss or what is the error that the particular neural network is or CNN is making, either while doing classification or either while doing regression, right? So how good or bad my network is, and that good or bad can be quantified by using these different types of loss functions. So these are energy functions or these are loss functions, which can which quantifies, and you have seen one of the simplest is maybe the mean square error loss function as we know, or maybe the entropy based loss functions that we have seen, right? So any questions about the structure of the CNNs? Any questions we have? Okay. So now let's very quickly sort of walk through a data imbalance problem, right? And here is the problem which has been shown across to you. So if you look at a brain volume, right? And if you look at a brain volume with respect to a non-tumor brain volume, right? Then you can see that most of the times in the brain, there are these 75%. So these are some typical figures on a typical frame. That is what we are showing it to you. So 75% of the brain volume has a healthy tissue, and rest 25% is the tumor, right? So, but that 25% tumor is also pretty large. It can happen that tumor sizes can typically be even smaller than that. And now if you look at a tumor subclass, then you will find that necrosis is only 0.7%. That means even a very small element of it. The enhancing tumor, which is a component which is outside which is tumorous part, but it is growing. So we call it as an enhancing tumor. That is around 6%. And the edema, which is the inflammation, is about 18%. Right? Now this is considering a brain volume. But if you consider the background as well, so the slices which I have shown you, slices are having this black background as well, right? So considering that black background, if you now look at the tumor volume, right, is even less than 0.1%. So now you can see that the hypercube which I am giving you has got 99.1% of non-tumor tissues and maybe less than 1% of the tumor tissues, right? And if you train neural networks with this type of imbalance, then you will find that most of the time neural network is going to tell you the classification of a majority class, which in this case the majority class is a non-tumor tissues, right? So I'll again pause here. I would request, how would you solve this problem of class imbalance? What are your suggestions about it? How do you think we can solve this problem? I request anyone to volunteer, please.
To start with, could you remove the background from the brain, and then maybe we can. So
Yes. So your suggestion in a way is intuitive, that let's say if I remove the background, at least I'll reduce. I mean, I'll make my tumor tissues more in prominence. But still, if you look at this is quite an imbalance, right? On this is 75% to 25. So that again is not really solving a problem. So how do we look at it? I mean, in the next slide, of course, I'm going to show you the solution, but this is just to sort of get your views. Or any simple idea, I mean.
Could we use more of representation of the tumor classes based images?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes. So that is exactly the idea, and that is known as sampling, right? So what you do is that you sample less from the majority class and you sample more from the non-majority class. That is a good suggestion that you gave. and that we call it as a patch sampling. The other way of looking at these loss functions are to use weighted loss functions, right? So I told you that loss functions typically are to quantify the performance of my classifier or a regressor. In this case, it is classifier. So we are quantifying that performance of how good the classification is. Now, normally, if your classes are balanced, that means there are equal representation of, let's say we are looking at binary classification just to talk through. And there are equal representation of both the majority and the minority class, then you may not need actually the weighted loss. But similar to the idea of what we are doing here is that you can see that this is a very simple, a very elementary cross entropy loss function, right? Entropy we know is an average information representation if you look at it from an information theoretic perspective. And these are all probabilities, okay? So even though these labels are given, so y true is a ground truth label, actually a probability of a ground truth label, and y predict is the probability of the predicted label, right? And you know that minus p log p and its summation over all the probabilities is the average entropy which it is representing, right? So if you sum over all voxels and all classes, this is actually giving you and it is actually an entropy, but this entropy is between the ground truth label and the predicted level, right? And higher the value, better it is. But in this case, now it has also been weighed, and these weights are to be selected in a manner that it can give higher weight to a minority class and maybe a lower weight to a majority class. So you are trying to then sort of trying to do this balancing act between the two, right? This is also something. So all the other loss functions, right? So this is a dice loss function. So dice loss function is, you can think of it in a very intuitive way as an intersection over union type of a thing, right? So I can think of segmentation being predicted. So I have a segmented value available. I have the ground truth value available. And with respect to ground truth, how much is the original segmented results are overlapping, right? That is coming out through intersection. And how much is the total volume? I mean, how much is the total area of both of these segmented results combined is the union. So if they are perfectly overlapping, you can see that this intersection over union value will turn out to be 1. So we can also use this type of a weighing concepts in these types of loss functions as well. And another interesting way to do or handle class imbalance is to use appropriate augmentation technique. So normally in a data-driven approaches, we have to do augmentation. But what I meant by augmentation here is it's not just classical affine transformation based augmentation, but it is like maybe converting one type of class to or one type of modality to other type of modality. So what people are working on is that given a CT image, can that be converted to an MRI image using the mathematical transformation? And that transformation should be lossless, right? So one can look at if the CT scans of a particular patient at a particular time is available and also the MRI scans are available, then one can convert from CT to MRI or from MRI to CT. So maybe that type of augmentation techniques may work here. Let me just show you the evolution of the CNN architectures. So I have shown you one basic structure of convolution neural network, which was using a fully connected layer at an output, right? So fully connected layer at an output is a sort of inefficient representation. But in initial days, when this BRAT started from 2014 onwards, the CNN started dominating. And then with the computational power increasing, the number of layers in CNN became like from 10 layers, 15 layers, it went to maybe 50, 70 layers and so on. So there were these deeper CNNs that came in. From 2016 onwards, there is a trend of eliminating completely the fully connected layer at an output. And instead of that, let's have a full convolutional neural network. So we call them as FCNNs. F stands for fully convolutional neural networks. And then if you look at last edition 2020, so either you can do, I'll show you that as well, but you can do segmentation either in 2-dimensional space or you can do a segmentation in 3-dimensional space. Depending on that, you will find there is a 2D network and there is a 3D networks which are available. And so if you look at 2020 literature, so 2020 LNCS proceedings will now come out. And if you can read through that, you will find that most of the networks are 3D networks and they are using these ensembles. So they are not a single classifiers, but there are many classifiers now. And an ensemble classification is used. And a very intuitive idea with an ensemble is that if you have more classifiers giving out a result, then consensus is always better as compared to a single classifier opinion. That's the basic idea. And therefore you will have a higher confidentiality, not confidentiality, higher confidence score in that. To show you a popular CNN architectures, the way it can be done is, one of the advantages that we have is that we have many modalities available, as I have shown you earlier, T1, T2, T1C, FLAIR and so on. And they are all hypercube. So mathematically, if you look at, you are actually creating an overdetermined system, right? So the trend is you use all the modalities for processing. And therefore, instead of giving just one cube, maybe you are using all these cubes to be given as an input, right? So let's say we select a small patch and give it to this particular network, right? The other trend currently is to look at multi-scale features, right? So if you can read through, you can see that the convolution filter size here is 7 by 7. And the lower branch, the convolution filter size is 13 by 13, right? So 7 by 7 is looking at a smaller input region, right? And 13 by 13 is looking at a larger region, very obvious. And therefore, the upper branch is learning the feature at a local level because it is looking at a smaller neighborhood. And the lower branch is learning the feature at a global level or a larger level, right? And then we would like to learn at multi-scale and we would like to combine both of these feature set together. So if you finally look at, we are concatenating both the local features and the global features. And then finally we are rolling out the result here, right? And at an output, you can see that there is this softmax function which is used, which is like softmax is mapping everything in the range 0 to 1. So you can think of this as a type of probability score, which is coming out at an output, right? So these are networks which learns at multiple feature, I mean at multi-scale, right? This is another very popular architecture, deep medic architecture, which is also based on the same notion. But here you can think of, there is this additional.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
Yeah. This particular network is an example of full CNN.
This particular network is an example of a fully convolutional neural networks. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Just wanted to confirm.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Similar to a previous thing, this is also learning at both the resolution, the low resolution and the normal resolution. But now you can see that there is this connection which is coming in, right? So these connections are known as skip connections. And skip connections, you can see that the features which are learned at the previous level is also being made available here. Right. So what you are doing is that the feature maps which are learned previously are carried forward. And it has been shown that this is a better learning strategy. So these are known as skip connections. So this particular network is using both multi-scale as well as it is concatenating features across different scales. And therefore you can see that this is at one of the time 2018 architecture was very popular. We will spend few minutes more here on this architecture. This is the workhorse right now. And it has started evolving from 2019. And this is another nice example of a fully convolutional neural networks. And you can see that it is like a English letter U. So this is popularly known as UNet. And this belongs to a class of CNNs or FCNNs rather, which are based on an encoder-decoder architecture, right? So if you carefully observe on the left-hand branch, what you are going to observe is that the size of the spatial dimensions are reducing, right? So here it is 572, you go to 284, and finally you land up with 32. So the spatial sizes are reduced, but the number of activation maps or number of filters which are used are increasing. So we go from 64 number of filters to 128 to maybe finally here 1024. And the idea here is that the information about the features are encoded in the spatial domain, are encoded in this depth maps which you are creating. So spatially they are very small, but their depth is very large. And so this is the encoder branch, right? You know the process of encoding. Basically the encoding is used to store, maybe used to store the same information in a different form, which takes a lower amount of memory. Let's put it that way, right? So that's an encoder branch. And if you look at on the right hand side, this is known as a decoder branch. So again, it is slightly opposite to what you are doing here. In this case, we are increasing the spatial dimensions. So I go from 52 all the way to 392. So I'm increasing the spatial dimensions and my depth dimensions are reducing. So if my depth is 1024 here, it is 512 here, and finally I'm coming back to 64. Now I told you the idea of learning feature at the same scale. So you can see that here it is increasing the spatial dimensions, right? So one of the way to increase the spatial dimension is by doing this interpolation. So when I go from level X to level 2X, I'm doing interpolation. You know the basic idea of interpolation, right? If I have been given 2 points and if I have to find the point in between, one of the simplest is the bilinear interpolation. So I take point A, I take point B, A plus B by 2, I get a midpoint. And I fill in that particular value, right? But that's not a, so that leads to an error as compared to the original resolution which you may have available, right? So this is also 128, which is reconstructed, and the original 280 resolution is also available. So what is done is that now learning is happening at different levels. So this original resolution and this reconstructed resolution is used to learn the features as well. And therefore this original resolution is also made available from encoder to the decoder. And you can see that finally at this particular layer, it is using only 1-by-1 convolution. And therefore this particular networks have given a rise to a lot of very, very strong results. And most of the architectures which you find now are the variants of these types of unit architectures. Right. So let me show you. I don't have to re-elaborate this. You can see that there is a lot of evolution. This whole game is being based on these graphics processing unit, right? And with AMD and NVIDIA and all those companies driving this force, and you can see that these are multi-core processors which are available, and there is a lot of parallelism. And in parallel to it, there are these lot of big brothers like Google and Facebook are pushing for these types of libraries, like PyTorch is from Facebook, or maybe TensorFlow is coming from Google, and they are sitting on tons of data. So they are pushing these types of popular software libraries which are also available, right? So both the combination of hardware as well as software is driving these data-driven approaches. Just to show you very quickly some of the results, we started by looking at these types of encoder-decoder architectures. We also use this notion of skip connections. But what we did was that we used these additional components which are known as dense modules. So in the previous case, I have shown you that maybe we are using features only from one previous layer to the next layer. But in dense modules, all the features which are available from the previous layer to the current layer, all of them are used simultaneously. So we concatenate all features at different scales together. So let's say, for example, I am at layer 5th in my network. So I'll concatenate features coming from layer 1, 2, 3, and then 4 as well. And all of them will put together and we let them flow. And therefore there was these dense modules which was used in a classical unit architecture. And also we were arguing in this case that we don't have to do 5-layer unit or maybe 7-layer unit, but 3-layer unit is also good enough with these types of dense modules coming in. But they are 2D, meaning they are processing only a slice, and that slices were processed only in the spatial dimensions. We were not looking at the correlation in the depth dimensions, right? And yeah. And is there any question here?
Bhakti Shah? I think no, sir.
Okay, thanks. And if you compare, these are some different variations, right? So we have used all these 4 different modalities, different number of filters, the type of loss functions also varies, and this particular combination of a 2D unit gave a so I told you about the dice loss, right? So which is intersection of union, and the highest of the value is 1. So the whole tumor was detected very well, but the enhancing tumor was not detected that well. And one of the reason was that enhancing tumor matches with the normal brain tissues as well, and therefore it is difficult to segregate, right? And here also you can observe that maybe we are suspecting that this particular network was overfitting the training set, right? So if you look at the performance on the validation set, the highest accuracy was coming out to be 0.75, while for a training set it was turning out to be 0.93. So I'm suspecting that there is this overfitting case, and we have to tune the regularization so that these two losses between the training and the validation set are sort of close to each other, right? These are some graphical results, and these are some segmentation results. So if you look at these 4th model, right? If you look at these 4th model, 4th combination, which we are calling it as model 4, is this particular fellow, right? So this is the original slice. This is a ground truth value that is given to us, and this particular is the best result that is obtained with respect to the other and we have not done a pseudo color coding, but you can see that it is identifying the tumor core, the enhancing tumor, and then the whole tumor structure. This is the original slice that we are looking at. And then from there on, we move to a 3D encoder decoder architecture. It is almost similar with these dense modules and with the skip connections coming in. But now instead of processing a slice, we are processing a volume. So what we are doing is that it will allow you to explore both the spatial correlation as well as the depth correlation. And if you look at these combination of spatio-temporal correlation together, then the results are better. It is, but at the cost of also a higher, computation component, right? And here also similar thing is being developed. You can see that here this particular set over enhancing tumor or a whole tumor or a tumor core, this model fortunately is not overfitting, right? So results are more or less the similar numbers that you can see between the training set and the validation set. But this was not the state of the art. I mean, this was not the best of the method when we participated in BRETS 2020 for segmentation. Like every network, these networks are also prone to failure, right? So it can give you a good results. This has been cherry picked for you. So it shows a good segmentation results, but many times these networks also fail to do a correct segmentation, right? So that's why they have to be taken with a pinch of salt. So now let's enter into the realm of the second task, right? So the first task we have completed segmentation. Now the second task, once the tumor segmentation has been done, we would like to do the overall survival prediction. And of course, this is also a supervised form of problem. And the BRATs have given these types of time frame. So they have given for every patient, they have given these long survivors, mid survivors, and the short survivors duration. Now you can see that it is very difficult to predict exactly number of days. You can try doing that using using regressors, but then these are given as intervals, right? So it is difficult to do prediction because tumor itself is a very, very unpredictable phenomenon to look at. And this data is given for a special type of tumors, which are known as high-grade glioma. So HGG is a high-grade glioma, and there is another type which is known as a low-grade glioma. So HGG is more aggressive of a multiform glioblastoma, which I was talking about earlier. And there were two types of status which are given here. One is known as a gross total resection. Gross total resection meaning once the tumor has been identified, then it is surgically a complete tumor has been removed. So therefore, this is known as a gross total resection. And sometimes it may happen that you cannot remove the whole tumor. So therefore, you remove only a part of it. So therefore, it is known as a subtotal resection. So these status along with the age of the patient is given to us as a data. Every problem need not to be solved only by deep learning, and this here is one of the example. And we try to solve this problem using normal handcrafted based methods, right? And one of the reason for doing it is that these data sets or data points are not enough. So if I use deep learning, then it may very easily overfit the data. So that was the thing that we wanted to avoid. And there are a lot of good tools which are available, which allows you to extract these types of features, right? So if any one of you are interested, you look through something known as a PyRadiomics, PyRadiomics as a feature set, which allows you to extract these medical image features. And it can allow you to extract statistical features. It allows you to extract shape features. It allows you to extract the texture features. So we use these combinations of the features to and these features are extracted from both the ground truth labels which are given to you and also from the whole tumor region. I told you earlier that it is better to use ensemble approaches, so therefore we use these random forest ideas, random forest classifiers. You know that you can have an ensemble approach because you can control the depth and the number of trees. And the result which I am showing to you was 2019, wherein this is our reference which we participated, and that was the method which was ranked the best on the test set, right? And you can still see, even though that was considered to be, now this year it has been bettered. So we got something like an classification accuracy of 59%, which is not that great, right? And this year, I think the leaderboard was showing around 62% of the OS prediction classification accuracy. And these are still numbers, right? So tumor is such a difficult phenomenon to look at that even though at a time you are processing, that fellow itself is completely evolving, right? So depending on how quickly you are rolling out these results, one has to take them with a pinch of salt, right? And here is some of the things that we try to improvise in the architecture, or we try to improvise in the feature set, which I think gave us a slightly better accuracy as compared to the others, right? And these are all different measures of looking it through. So coming to the conclusion, this is really a tough problem actually to look at. And with the power of deep learning, it is available, but the same time, the problem is that deep learning itself is a blacker than a black box. And what has happened due to that unfortunately these are all number crunchers. So you can put in anything that you want and it generates the result as you like. But then validation from the medical fraternity is extremely important. So those who are interested in looking at this particular ideas for their either dissertation or projects, if they can ensure a participation from a medical fraternity, is the best thing to look at. I told you the ideas of and also it is not important that everything you try to solve using the one approach of deep learning itself. You are still free to use non-deep learning approaches. And my advice to everyone who would be looking at is that if it is always better to solve the problem by using simple methods rather than by looking at a very complex hypothesis. And that's very truly said in what is known as an Occam razor, right? So Occam razor tells us that you should try to solve the problem with as simple approach as possible. Currently, initially we believed that, and it is also true, that the type of segmentation that you are doing can impact OS prediction, that is overall survival prediction. But we have not been able to find too much difference from the overall survival prediction results, which was extracted from a 2D segmentation algorithm versus a 3D segmentation algorithm. And one can really do these analysis because there is a lot of statistical analysis which one can do in order to find which are the prominent features here. And one can do a lot of statistical testing. One can do a lot of recursive feature elimination processes to come up with, or maybe to find principal features like principal component analysis to find which are the most dominant features and can do the overall survival prediction. And the challenge, or that is the BRAT segmentation challenge, has grown over the years, and they have kept on introducing one after the another the problems. So first it started with segmentation, then 2018 they introduced overall survival prediction. 2019 they introduced something known as uncertainty prediction. So uncertainty prediction meaning how much confidence I have in the classification of the labels that I am assigning, right? So one has to also look at this particular ID. And 2020 was supposed to have one more problem, which did not, unfortunately, they cannot render it because I think not enough data was available. But the problem here is that they are trying to find many times an MRI imaging modality can also give false positives. So what they have observed is that specifically in the case of subtotal resection, sorry, not even subtotal, specifically in the case of even from a gross total resection, if the tumor is completely removed, but in MRI modality, it is revealed as a tumor. And they call it as a pseudo progression. Pseudo, you know, is false, right? So they call it as a pseudo progression. And therefore, they would like to find whether this is actually a tumor or whether this is actually a pseudo progression. So that's the fourth problem, which will be, I think, will appear in the next year's BRATS 2021, right? Interesting domain, but a difficult domain to look at. And my advice to you will be that if you would like to follow a researcher, then I would advise you to follow Dr. Spyridon Bacchus, the first author here. He is the one who is pioneering the BRATS challenge every year. And of course, in case there are others as well. In case you want to look at some of our work in this particular domain, you can always reach out to me, or you can find it out on the web as well, right? So with this, I'll stop here and thank you for the session. And I'll be open to any questions that anyone has at this particular moment. And that's what I said, that we will spend about 1 hour, 30-40 minutes. And then if there are any discussions, I'll be happy to take them on.
Thank you so much, sir, for the session. Participants, if you have any questions, we can go ahead.
Fine. I think then we can call it a day. And thank you for
Hello, sir.
Yes, please go ahead.
Hello, Mehul sir. This is Amit Parmar from Charuset University, Chang.
Yes, Amit, please go on.
Sir, my question is that related to this tumor. Is this tumor moving, or this tumor is movable in the brain, or if it is movable, then can we track the tumor, or can we track the motion?
Usually these tumors are not that like a fluidic type of things. Okay. But what you are visualizing is also partially correct. And it can happen that they are not as a single unit at a particular location. But there can be many locations where there are these instances which are present. So that can happen.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Okay, do we have any other participant with a question?
Good morning, sir. Mansingh Rathod from KJSM IIT. Sir, is there any parameter we have to consider to identify the tumors? Different parameters.
You are looking at parameters for
brain tumors. So different brain tumors may be different categories. So which category is having which parameter to identify the brain tumors?
So currently, Mansingh, the idea here is we are actually not segregating amongst the type of tumor, right? So if there are works which based on either a texture information or based on the location, based on the size, based on what part of the region they are available, based on the centroids of those particular thing. You can also actually do a study to differentiate between these two, or actually find out what the tumor type is. But what I am narrating to you right now today is for a specific type of tumor, where it is, and to segregate it in the whole MRI hypercube that is given to us. And then the classical segmentation metrics are used to find the efficacy of the segmentation approach. So you can use dissimilarity coefficient, you can use accuracy, you can use mean square error, Spearman correlation coefficient, and so on, which is nothing but giving you the comparative matrix between the ground truth, because these are supervised learning available. So it is giving you a comparative metric between the ground truth and the segmented result which you have obtained. I hope I am making that clarity.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. I hope there are no more questions from participants. If anyone, request you to please unmute immediately.
Yeah, and I think this is actually the best part for me as well, and the best part for you as well, because thanks to organizer, they are putting in so much effort to bring in all these different entities together, and therefore I think it is beneficial for you all to be more vocal. That's what my request to you all will be. Fine, then I think we can call it a day. I would not like to stand in between you and maybe the next speaker or a lunch. So thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. It is always a great learning experience when we have you. And thank you so much for agreeing to live for the second time as well. And we had a great learning, and I look forward to inviting you to our institute once the pandemic is over. If you could travel to Mumbai sometimes, or you're visiting Mumbai, we would love to have you. And looking forward to your more guidance and collaborations as well, sir.
Absolutely. Anytime anyone is, feel free to reach out to me, and I'll be more than happy to help at any given.
We shall do some projects on brain tumor segmentation, and we shall
do that.
forward you the outcomes, sir.
We can do
And we will need your guidance always.
Absolutely. Thank you, and have a good day to all of you ahead. And thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. Requesting the participants to join for the next session at 1:30 p.m. Because of an urgent meeting for the speaker, we have shifted the session a little late. We shall start latest by 1:30. And please note that the exam, the qualifier exam, is at 3:30, from 3:30 to 4:30. And we shall be having the valedictory after that. So requesting you all to please be present on the exact time of the exam. We shall send the link via email to all of you. Thank you. Do you have anything to ask us related to exam? Okay, great. Thank you so much. Prashant sir, we may end the meeting.